People who grow up in places like northern Minnesota learn early that winter isn't something you get through. It's something you coexist with. Blizzards aren't emergencies, they're routines. You stock food, charge your phone, and wait. That's why no one panicked when the forecast called for whiteout conditions that night. I was 19 years old and had lived in that house my entire life. It sat on the edge of a wooded stretch outside town, with only 3 neighbors spread across a half-mile. When my parents told me they'd be staying overnight with relatives in Duluth, I didn't think twice about being alone. I'd done it before. By early evening, snow had already erased the road. Wind slammed against the siding hard enough to rattle the dishes in the cabinets. Trees bent and creaked outside, their branches snapping under the weight of ice. Around 9 p.m., cell service became spotty. The radio crackled constantly with weather alerts. Still, everything felt normal. At 11:17 p.m., the power went out. The house went dead silent except for the wind. No hum of appliances. No ticking heater. Just the low, endless roar of the storm pressing in from all directions. I lit candles and moved them room to room, the shadows stretching and shrinking as the flames flickered. The temperature dropped quickly. I layered blankets on the couch and tried to distract myself with my phone, but the battery was already dipping fast. I was just starting to drift off when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 deliberate taps. Not loud, not frantic, measured. I froze. The sound didn't come from a wall or window. It came from the front door. My first thought was that the wind had thrown something against it, but the timing felt wrong. Too intentional. Too evenly spaced. I held my breath and listened. A full 30 seconds passed. Then it came again. This time louder. I sat up, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. No one should have been outside. The county had issued a shelter-in-place advisory hours earlier. Plows were grounded. Emergency services were limited to life-or-death calls only. I didn't move. Then I heard a voice. "Miss, please." It was barely audible, muffled by the storm, but it was close. "I'm freezing." The words didn't sound slurred or panicked. They sounded practiced. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The candlelight barely reached the entryway. My hands shook as I leaned toward the peephole. All I saw was white. Snow blew sideways, so thick it erased depth entirely. No silhouette, no movement. "I can see your light," the voice said. My stomach dropped. I stepped back and whispered that he should go to the neighbor's house down the road. There was no response. Then I heard knocking again. Not at the front door, at the side of the house. I jumped, spinning toward the sound. 3 knocks again, slow, spaced out. The voice followed. "I know you're awake." I backed away, panic flooding in. The knocking moved again, this time to the back door. Same rhythm, same voice. Each knock felt closer, more deliberate. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and called 911. The dispatcher sounded exhausted. She told me officers couldn't reach me until morning. Roads were impassable. She asked me to stay somewhere secure and stay on the line. While she talked, I heard the knocking change. It stopped being polite. It became exploratory. Fingers scraped against windows. Knuckles rapped on walls. Slow footsteps crunched through snow around the house. The voice drifted from one side to the other, never raising its volume, never sounding angry. Just persistent. "I can wait." At one point, I heard something heavy lean against the back wall. The entire house creaked under the pressure. I sat on the bathroom floor, wrapped in towels, listening as the storm screamed outside and a stranger circled my home. Around 4:30 a.m., everything went quiet. No wind, no knocking, just silence. When daylight finally broke, police arrived on snowmobiles. They searched the property while I stood, shaking on the porch. They found footprints, bare feet. They circled the house slowly, deliberately, over and over again. Then they led straight into the woods and vanished beneath the snow. I've lived in the Midwest my entire life, which means winter never felt dangerous to me, just inconvenient. You learn early how to deal with it. Keep blankets in your car. Don't let your gas tank drop too low. Drive slower when it snows. If the weather turns bad, you wait it out. That mindset is what got me into trouble. I left Madison just after 9 p.m., heading toward Minneapolis to visit my sister. The forecast mentioned light snow, nothing more. I remember rolling my eyes when she texted me to be careful. I'd made the drive dozens of times, in worse conditions than this. For the first hour, everything was fine. Then the storm hit like someone flipped a switch. Visibility dropped to almost nothing in seconds. Wind slammed into the side of my car, shoving snow across the road in thick horizontal sheets. My headlights reflected straight back at me, turning the world into a wall of white. Brake lights appeared ahead, blurry, distorted. Traffic slowed, then stopped completely. No one panicked at first. Engines idled. Hazard lights blinked weakly through the snow. I checked my phone. No signal. The radio faded into static, one station after another. Snow piled up fast. It crept around the tires, packed itself beneath the doors. After about 20 minutes, drivers started turning their engines off to conserve fuel. I did the same. That's when I noticed movement outside. At first, I thought it was just the snow playing tricks on me. But then I saw the shape clearly. A person walking between the stopped cars, leaning forward into the wind. He moved slowly, carefully. The man stopped beside my driver's side window and knocked. I rolled it down just enough to hear him. Cold air rushed in instantly, sharp enough to hurt. His face was mostly hidden behind a scarf pulled up to his eyes. Snow clung to his jacket and shoulders. He said his car had stalled further back. Said he'd been walking for a while. Asked if he could sit in my car for a few minutes to warm up. His voice didn't shake. He wasn't shivering. Something about that felt wrong. I apologized and told him I didn't feel comfortable letting a stranger inside. I suggested he try another car, maybe someone traveling with family. He stared at me for several seconds, didn't blink. Then he nodded once and walked away, disappearing back into the storm. I locked my doors. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. People get stranded all the time. He was probably just tired. Still, my stomach didn't settle. Time dragged on. Snow pressed against the windshield so thick I had to scrape it from the inside just to see. Somewhere up the road, a car alarm went off and didn't stop. An hour passed. Then a horn started blaring. Not a quick honk, a constant one. Desperate. I leaned forward, squinting through the snow. A few cars ahead, doors were open. Shadows moved between vehicles. That's when I saw him again. The same man. This time, the scarf was gone. His face was pale and stiff, skin pulled tight. His lips were dark blue. The tips of his fingers were blackened, raw, split from the cold. And he was smiling. He knocked on my window again. I didn't roll it down. I found one that wouldn't lock their doors, he said. I felt my stomach drop. He turned and walked toward a car a few spaces ahead of mine. The driver's door was hanging open, flapping slightly in the wind. Snow blew straight into the interior. The horn kept blaring. I couldn't see anyone inside. There was nowhere to go. No road. No service. Just a line of frozen cars trapped in the dark. Hours later, emergency crews finally reached us once the storm eased enough to move. Snowmobiles. Flashing lights cutting through the white. They found one empty car. The doors were open. The horn still blaring. There were no footprints leading away from it. None at all. In the winter of 2014, I volunteered with a county emergency response group in northern Colorado. We weren't police or paramedics. Our job was simpler. During severe weather, we monitored radio channels, relayed information, and helped coordinate resources when phones stopped working. That February, a blizzard shut down half the state. By midnight, roads were impassable. Plows were grounded. Emergency calls were restricted to life-or-death situations only. Our operations room was quiet in that specific way it only gets during disasters. Radios humming softly, maps spread across tables. Everyone listening more than talking. At 2:03 a.m., a weak transmission broke through the static. A woman's voice. She sounded calm, but tired. She said she was stranded on a back road with her daughter. The car wouldn't start. The heater had stopped working. Her phone battery was almost dead, but the radio still worked. We asked for her location. She gave us a set of coordinates. They didn't match any road in the county. At first, we assumed she'd misread something. We asked her to repeat them. She did. Same numbers. Same order. We checked again. Still nothing. We tried guiding her to nearby landmarks. Mile markers, road signs, anything identifiable. She said there weren't any, just snow and trees. As the storm intensified, her voice changed. Not panicked, not weaker, quieter, slower. We asked how her daughter was doing. There was a pause before she answered. She's asleep. After that, she stopped mentioning the child unless we asked directly. At 3:17 a.m., we heard something else over the radio. Another sound. Low. Close. Like someone speaking just out of range of the microphone. We asked her if anyone else was with them. She said no. At 4:01 a.m., she spoke again. Someone's here now. We asked her to clarify. She didn't. We heard a second voice in the background. Not loud enough to understand. Just close. Whispering. Then the transmission cut to static. We tried calling back. No response. Search teams reached the coordinates after the storm passed. They found the car. It was pulled off onto what should have been empty terrain. No road. No tracks leading in. The doors were closed. Inside, everything was intact. Blankets. A child's backpack. A radio still powered on, hissing softly with static. No footprints surrounded the vehicle. Not adult. Not child. Nothing led away from it. The snow around the car was completely undisturbed. I've always driven through snowstorms. I grew up in Wisconsin, where blizzards are part of the landscape, part of life. You respect them, you prepare for them, but you don't fear them. That night changed everything. I was 22, just out of college, and heading home from a job interview in Minneapolis. The drive was supposed to be straightforward, around 6 hours, mostly highway. I had a full tank, an emergency kit, blankets, food, and water. Standard precautions. The weather forecast called for light snow. I laughed when my friends warned me, joking about how they always overreacted. At first, it was nothing. Flurries, patches of ice, cars moving slowly. I settled into my routine, steady speed, keeping headlights on, scanning the road for hazards. The highway was empty by 10 p.m., usual for that stretch, but the night felt quiet, almost too quiet. By 11:15 p.m., visibility started to drop. The flurries thickened into a relentless curtain of white. My windshield wipers struggled to keep up, and the heater worked overtime. The radio was static, with occasional alerts about road closures further north. I ignored them at first, thinking they were routine warnings. Then I noticed a line of cars ahead, slowing to a stop. Brake lights glowing red through the snow. I slowed behind them, rolling down my window slightly to hear the wind. The temperature had dropped sharply. The air stung my lungs. An hour later, traffic had completely stopped. Engines were off. Snow piled against tires, forming small drifts around doors. Some people got out of their cars to stretch, but mostly everyone stayed inside, wrapped in jackets and blankets. There was a sense of uneasy calm, as if we were all waiting for the storm to pass. I turned off my engine to conserve fuel. The snow pressed against the hood and windshield like it was trying to trap me inside. The silence, broken only by the wind and occasional shouts from other drivers, felt heavy. I checked my phone. No signal. The map app couldn't load. I was effectively alone, stranded in the middle of nowhere. That's when I first saw him. At first, he was a shadow moving between cars, shuffling through the snow. Then he appeared clearly, a man, maybe late 30s, bundled in a coat and scarf, trudging slowly through the storm. He carried nothing. No bag, no flashlight, nothing that suggested he belonged there. His eyes were dark and fixed straight ahead, unblinking. He stopped at my car and knocked lightly on the window. I rolled it down an inch. "I'm stuck," he said. "My car's gone. Could I sit in yours for a minute?" Something about his tone was wrong. Too calm, too precise, like he had rehearsed the words. I said no. I suggested he try the cars ahead or wait for emergency crews. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded and continued down the line of vehicles, slipping into the white haze like a ghost. The storm worsened. Visibility was now almost zero. Snow fell so thick it clung to my windshield, forming layers that I had to scrape constantly. The wind slammed against the sides of the car, groaning through the frame. Around 1:30 a.m., distant sirens wailed. Muffled by the storm, then vanished. Emergency services were clearly struggling to reach anyone. 2 hours later, the man returned. This time, his scarf was gone. His face was pale and rigid, lips blue, fingers blackened with frostbite. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just looked at me through the window. His gaze was cold, unwavering, like he had been waiting all night. Then he smiled. Not the friendly kind, but slow, deliberate, knowing. My heart raced. I locked the doors. He continued down the highway, disappearing into the snow. Moments later, I heard screaming. Not from a distance, but close, behind me, from the car directly ahead. Horns blared. Doors slammed. Shadows moved between vehicles. My stomach churned as I realized what he had been doing all night, testing who was alert, who was cautious, who would respond. By 5 a.m., the storm had reached its peak. Whiteout conditions. Cars buried under snow. Exhaust fumes freezing in the air, forming icy clouds around vehicles. The line of stranded drivers had grown chaotic. Some had abandoned cars, others huddled in them silently. It was impossible to see more than 10 feet ahead. I considered leaving my vehicle, try to reach the nearest plowed road. But the wind was relentless, snow drifts reached waist height, and every step felt like it could be my last. A single misstep could mean being swept away, buried, or simply lost in the storm. The man's face haunted me. I kept imagining him appearing behind me in the snow, smiling. By 6:30 a.m., visibility improved slightly. Emergency crews arrived, plowing through the drifted cars. They instructed drivers to stay inside until help reached them. One officer approached my car, knocking on the window. Relief flooded me. But relief turned to terror when he told me about what they had found. A car 3 vehicles behind mine had been emptied. The driver vanished. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just the car, doors ajar, engine off, surrounded by snow. Emergency crews had searched for miles, but there was no trace of the person. The storm had erased any evidence, leaving only the chilling possibility that someone or something had taken them. I learned later that several other drivers reported a man walking between cars, asking to come inside. Most said he looked injured, desperate, but none could explain how he appeared and disappeared so quickly in the middle of the blizzard. Some speculated frostbite, hallucinations from exhaustion, or even a mentally unstable person exploiting the storm. The truth was never confirmed. I couldn't sleep for days. Every time the wind howled, I imagined him walking past, his icy fingers knocking on the window, that slow, deliberate smile. The highway where it happened became infamous among locals. Drivers shared stories. People avoided it during winter storms. Some swear the blizzard that night was one of the worst in recent memory, not because of snow accumulation, but because of the fear it left behind. Years later, I still drive through snowstorms. I take every precaution. But there's a part of me that remembers the line of cars frozen in the whiteout, the unknown man, and the way the storm could erase someone entirely. Sometimes, when I'm alone on a deserted highway and snow falls fast, I think about that night and wonder if I was lucky or just watched carefully enough not to become part of the storm's silent horror. I've spent most of my life around the Rockies, so I knew snow. I knew cold, isolation, and how unforgiving winter could be. But nothing prepared me for the night. I almost didn't make it out alive. It was January, a week after New Year's, and I decided to take a solo weekend trip to a small hunting cabin I'd rented from an old guide in the mountains. The cabin was remote, not marked well on any GPS, accessible only by a winding forest road that the locals said often disappeared under snow by late December. I had driven out during the day, confident, fully stocked with food, water, a generator, blankets, and my emergency kit. I was careful, always prepared, or at least I thought I was. The drive itself was uneventful at first. The forest was quiet, snow thick on the ground, trees heavy with white. By mid-afternoon, clouds rolled in and the temperature dropped sharply. I parked the car near the cabin, unpacked, and got the fire going. There was a faint sense of peace. No one else around for miles, just me and the mountain. By nightfall, the storm hit. Hard. Snow fell in sheets, wind howling like a living thing. The cabin shook under the gusts. windows rattling, snow piling against the walls. I turned on the generator, but it struggled against the cold, sputtering now and then. I lit every lantern and candle I had and made dinner, telling myself it would pass. I could hear the trees groaning outside, branches snapping and falling in the heavy snow. Around 11 p.m., the power went out completely. The generator died with a choke cough. Darkness enveloped the cabin. I wrapped myself in blankets, sitting close to the fire. Outside, the storm roared. Then I heard it, knocking. At first, I thought it was a branch hitting the cabin, but the knocks were deliberate, soft and rhythmic, coming from the front door. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. My heart jumped. I checked the windows. Nothing, just white. I told myself it was imagination. The wind can make strange sounds. Then came the voice. Hello, is anyone there? Please, I need help. I froze. No roads nearby. No one else should be out here. I didn't open the door. I barely breathed. The knocking moved from the door to the side windows. Light scraping sounds like fingers dragging. The voice whispered, closer, colder, clearer. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Nothing worked. I spent the rest of the night barricaded in the bedroom, fire dwindling, listening to the storm and the intermittent knocking, the voice now calm, patient. At times it felt as though someone was just outside the walls, pacing, breathing, waiting. Hours passed. The wind outside reached a pitch that made the cabin feel alive, creaking, bending, groaning. Morning didn't bring relief. The storm had intensified, snow so high I couldn't see the car from the window. The world outside had vanished. I had to survive on what I had. I started melting snow on the stove for water, eating what I could, rationing everything. But every creak, every sudden gust of wind made me think the knocking would resume. It never did. The silence was worse than the noise. On the second day, I made the decision to check the perimeter. Bundled in every layer I had, I stepped outside into the blizzard. Snow up to my knees, wind almost knocking me off balance. My eyes searched the surroundings. Nothing, just endless white and the occasional shadow of a tree. But then I saw it, footprints, bare footprints, leading around the cabin in a circle and disappearing into the forest. I panicked. My breath came in sharp, freezing gasps. I ran back inside, locked every door, pushed furniture against the entrances. I spent the day like that, huddled, watching the snow, listening. The footprints never returned. The voice never came back. But I felt watched, a presence in the storm. By the third day, the storm had eased slightly, visibility returning. I made a plan to leave. I wrapped myself, took my gear, and trudged toward the car. Snow had buried it almost completely. I cleared it as best I could and tried to start the engine. Nothing. Dead. The battery frozen. I tried the heater. Nothing. Panic rose. I was miles from the nearest road, maybe even farther. Then I noticed something at the tree line, a shadow moving between the trees. I froze. Not a deer, not an animal. Something human-shaped. Watching. Waiting. I didn't move for what felt like hours, then finally ran back toward the cabin. I barricaded myself again. It stayed there for the rest of the day. Not moving, not coming closer, just observing. That night, I sat in darkness, fire gone, generator dead. Snow hitting the walls. I realized I couldn't stay another night. My survival instincts kicked in. I packed what I could carry, wrapped myself in every blanket, and prepared to walk out into the storm. I knew it was risky, probably suicidal, but staying meant certain death eventually. I moved carefully, marking the cabin behind me in case I got disoriented. Step by step, I fought through waist-high snow. The shadow followed intermittently, staying at the edge of my vision. When I looked directly, it disappeared. My panic surged, but I kept moving. By the fourth day, I stumbled onto a snowed-over logging road. Plows had passed, tracks visible. I followed them for miles. My fingers and toes were numb, almost frostbitten. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Behind me, I thought I heard footsteps, faint against the snow, keeping pace. But whenever I turned, nothing. Eventually, I reached a main road. A passing truck stopped, driver nearly fainting when he saw me. I was emaciated, covered in frost, shaking uncontrollably. I was taken to a hospital. They said I was lucky to survive. I never saw the shadow again. I never heard the knocking again. The cabin? It's still there, rented out occasionally, in a remote section of the Rockies. Locals tell me stories. Other renters report hearing strange noises, knocks, shadows outside their windows. Some never return after their weekend trips. I've told this story many times, but I can't explain what I experienced. All I know is the storm wasn't the only thing out there. Someone was waiting, and it didn't let go.